Hey guys, tonight we're traveling far back, so far that sand still whispers the secrets of empires long turned to dust. You're standing in what will one day be called Persia, under the enormous sky that seems to press softly against the desert horizon. The air hums with quiet warmth, and far away you hear the low bleating of sheep, thousands of them, scattered like tiny clouds of wool across the ochre hills. This is where our story begins, not in a royal hall or a glorious battle, but in the threads of everyday life that tied together a civilization. You probably won't survive this heat though, let's be honest. Standing in the middle of an Iranian plateau in the 5th century BCE without sunscreen, hydration tablets, or even a decent hat is not ideal. But for now, you'll just imagine yourself here in comfort, wandering through the heart of the Achaemenid Empire, feeling the texture of the world beneath your fingertips. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk along a dusty road that winds between small villages, the kind that never make it into history books. The air smells faintly of smoke and wool. Here, everything, clothing, blankets, tents, is made by hand, spun by calloused fingers, and woven on looms that creak softly like the voice of time itself. The Persians understood early on that what you wear is never just fabric. It's identity, status, culture, and sometimes survival. A woman passes by, balancing a clay pot on her shoulder, her tunic fluttering around her knees. The fabric looks simple at first glance, undyed wool or perhaps a rough linen, but if you look closer, you notice a faint shimmer, the kind that suggests the thread was polished with oil. It's practical, breathable, and, let's be honest, a better look than the sweat-wicking polyester shirts we've come up with 2,000 years later. Everywhere you look, cloth defines life. Shepherds drape heavy cloaks against the chill of the mountains. Merchants wear lighter wraps, perfect for the desert heat. And nobles, they float by in cascading robes that catch the light like water. You can almost hear the faint rustle of silk, even though true silk is still rare here, imported in tiny, coveted amounts from mysterious lands farther east. Historians still argue whether Persia's wealth was best measured in gold or in fabric. You might think of treasure as coins or jewels, but for the Achaemenids, it was also in the bolts of finely woven cloth stored in the royal treasuries. The king's accountants literally recorded textiles alongside precious metals as part of the empire's assets. Cloth was portable wealth, soft yet powerful, and it wrapped the empire as tightly as any military conquest could. By the time of Darius I, Persia stretched from the Indus Valley to the Aegean Sea, roughly the size of modern Europe. Managing an empire that massive meant managing appearances too. Royal clothing wasn't just fashion, it was politics stitched in gold thread. Each color, each pleat, each patterned hem sent a message. The famous stone carvings at Persepolis show rows of dignitaries and guards, all in carefully rendered robes, every fold carved with loving precision. You can tell the artists cared deeply about cloth. Now, here's a fringe tidbit for you, one that makes you smile in the middle of the night. Some ancient accounts suggest that Persian nobles perfumed their garments not just with flowers or oils, but with smoke from burning aromatic woods and resins. Imagine that, your tunic slowly absorbing the scent of cedar and myrrh, like a walking incense stick. One Greek visitor supposedly complained that he couldn't tell where the people ended and the perfume began. Still, you have to admit, it's a vibe. As you keep walking, the road narrows, the wind softens, and you hear the hum of a spindle turning somewhere nearby. The sound is hypnotic, a faint whirring rhythm that feels older than language. You follow it toward a small courtyard where women sit beneath a tattered canopy, twisting wool into thread. Their fingers move in slow circles, each twist pulling a little more fiber into being. It's mesmerizing. This is where clothing begins, not with royalty or merchants, but with endless patience and repetition. You realize that to live in ancient Persia meant to live surrounded by texture. The coarse scratch of woven rugs underfoot, the soft drape of linen tunics, the heavy folds of cloaks meant to guard against cold nights in the mountains. Even tents, like those used by nomadic tribes, were feats of textile engineering. Thick goat hair fabric that swelled when wet, sealing out rain. That's right, the tent basically waterproofed itself. Take that, modern camping gear. And while the Persian heartland was rich with wool and linen, luxury was something else entirely. Traders carried bolts of fabric from as far away as Egypt, Babylon, and India. The Persians were nothing if not practical conquerors. They borrowed, adopted, and perfected techniques from every land they ruled. The empire's textile culture was a patchwork of influences: Mesopotamian motifs, Median weaving styles, Elamite dyes, and a touch of Central Asian flair. Some historians still debate whether Persian clothing styles influenced neighboring civilizations more than they were influenced in return. It's a chicken and egg question wrapped in silk. Greek chroniclers like Herodotus claimed Persians were addicted to foreign finery, while Persian inscriptions tell the opposite story, that foreigners copied them. The truth? Probably both. Cultures rarely exist in isolation. They blend, overlap, and borrow the best of each other, just like your Spotify playlists. As the sun sinks lower, you find yourself in a bustling market. The stalls overflow with bundles of wool, spools of dyed thread, and folded garments arranged by color. A young merchant waves you over, offering a strip of deep crimson cloth. He grins as he explains the dye came from crushed insects, cochineal cousins, imported through trade with the West. You raise an eyebrow. Yes, your soft, beautiful crimson scarf used to be bug juice. Sleep tight with that image. But despite the bugs, the artistry is undeniable. Every bolt of fabric carries a story: who made it, where it came from, and who might wear it. The Persians wove social hierarchy directly into their clothing. Nobles flaunted patterned tunics with ornate borders, while commoners wore simpler designs. Yet even the humblest worker wrapped themselves in something made by hand. A quiet statement of care in a world where nothing was disposable. A breeze rises, carrying with it the faint scent of wet earth and sheep wool. You tilt your head back, watching clouds drift lazily over the mountains. The empire seems infinite, a patchwork of deserts, rivers, and cities, each connected not by conquest alone, but by trade, textiles, and the shared comfort of something warm against the skin. And as you settle into this thought, the rhythmic whisper of a loom begins to echo faintly in your mind. The threads move back and forth, weaving patterns of history, of humanity, of dreams. The sound slows your heartbeat. You start to feel the soft pull of drowsiness at the edge of your thoughts. You realize this is only the beginning. The story of Persian clothing isn't just about fabric. It's about connection, innovation, and the small, beautiful routines that kept an empire stitched together. You wake to the low sound of hooves on dry soil. Morning in ancient Persia arrives quietly, the light pale and golden, spreading across fields that ripple like waves. You're walking now, feet brushing through tufts of rough grass and the occasional thistle. Ahead you can see them, the wool bearers, the quiet ones who never make it into royal inscriptions, the sheep. Entire hillsides are blanketed in their movement, pale shapes shifting in the haze. Their bleats blend with the distant whir of windmills, and for a moment you realize this is where all that luxury begins, in soft animal fluff and dusty patience. Shepherds move among the herds, wrapped in thick wool cloaks that smell faintly of smoke and lanolin. They carry long staffs, carved with patterns that might be family marks or maybe just idle decoration from lonely hours in the fields. A boy calls out to his flock, and the animals respond, slowly, lazily, as if they know there's nowhere else to be. The wool clinging to their backs is the empire's hidden treasure, though no one here seems to think about it that way. It's just life, just work. You bend down and pick up a tuft of loose fleece snagged on a thorn bush. It's coarse and full of dust, but soft underneath. Potential waiting to be washed, carded, and spun into something worthy of a king. The Persians valued wool as much as any gemstone. The northern regions, near Media, were particularly famous for their fine sheep breeds, and historical records describe tributes of wool sent to the royal treasury from satrapies across the empire. That's a mainstream historical fact for you. Wool wasn't just clothing, it was a form of tax. Pay your dues, or the empire might come collecting with shears in hand. Further south, where the rivers of Elam and Susiana twist through the plains, another crop waves gently in the morning breeze: flax. Linen, the cool cousin of wool, grows tall and delicate, its blue flowers swaying like ripples of sky. Farmers harvest it carefully, pulling the whole plant from the soil rather than cutting it, to preserve the precious fibers in the stem. You can almost feel the rough stalks between your fingers, the faint scent of earth and sun-dried straw clinging to them. Later, women will soak these bundles in water, rot away the pulp, and comb out the silky strands hidden inside. And here's where the empire's textile story takes a fascinating turn. Because while Persia was rich in native materials, it also craved the exotic. Traders brought cotton from India and silk from lands so mysterious that Greek writers half believed the fabric grew on trees. Historians still argue whether the Persians truly understood how silk was made during the Achaemenid period, or whether they simply treated it like magic, something spun by unseen spirits in the East. The first time a Persian merchant unrolled a bolt of shimmering Chinese silk, you can imagine the collective gasp. Wait, someone probably said, this came out of a bug? A quirky fact for your dreams: early Persian farmers sometimes brushed their sheep with oil before shearing. It made the wool easier to cut, added a bit of shine, and, supposedly, kept evil spirits away. Whether it worked for demons or dandruff, no one can say for sure. But the detail lingers, like a tiny thread of superstition woven into practicality. You follow a line of women down to a shallow stream, where they wash freshly sheared wool. The air smells faintly of soapwort and clay. They dip the fibers again and again, scrubbing out dirt and grease, beating them gently against flat stones. Water splashes up in cool arcs that catch the sunlight like glass. The rhythmic sound of labor feels almost meditative. These are the invisible hands of empire, nameless, patient, and indispensable. When the wool is clean, it's laid out to dry in great sheets across the ground. The color varies from creamy white to soft brown, depending on the sheep. You run your fingers through it, it's lighter than it looks. Soon, it will be carded with wooden combs to align the fibers, then twisted into yarn using a simple drop spindle. The technology hasn't changed much in millennia. Somewhere, maybe in your grandmother's attic, you've seen one just like it. A stick, a whirl, a thread. It's timeless. The shepherds return home at dusk, driving their flocks ahead of them. Their wives and daughters wait at the village edge, baskets ready to collect the day's yield. You watch them exchange a few tired jokes. One woman laughs, holding up a handful of wool and saying something that sounds like, "This will keep us warm through 3 winters, if the moths don't eat it first." Even 2,000 years ago, moths were the enemy. Some things never change. As night falls, fires flicker to life. You sit beside one, the air filled with the smell of roasting barley and wood smoke. A weaver hums softly as she teases out fibers, spinning them into thread. The rhythm of her spindle is steady, hypnotic. Each rotation pulled the empire a little tighter together. You find yourself lost in the motion, the twist of fingers, the hum of the fire, the whisper of the night wind against the tent walls. Then comes a sound that almost doesn't belong here, the faint jingle of metal bells. A caravan is arriving. The camels wear colorful saddlecloths embroidered with geometric designs. The merchants are draped in layered robes of linen and wool, dyed in hues you haven't seen before: deep greens, soft oranges, pale blues. They bring not only silk, but stories. Tales of Indian cotton fields, Babylonian dye houses, and Egyptian weavers who supposedly sang to their looms. Whether true or exaggerated, each tale adds another thread to the fabric of empire. Persia was, in many ways, the crossroads of the ancient world. From the Mediterranean to the Indus, goods flowed like rivers of color and texture. Even the simplest tunic worn by a soldier on the frontier might contain fibers that had traveled thousands of miles. Imagine a garment stitched with wool from Media, dyed with indigo from India, and trimmed with linen threads spun in Egypt. A global wardrobe before globalization was even a word. But of course, not everything was glamorous. For every merchant or noble wrapped in fine fabric, there were hundreds of workers bending over combs, looms, and dye vats. Their world smelled not of perfume, but of sweat and steam. And yet, in the monotony of daily work, there was art. Every twist of thread, every stroke of dye was an act of creation. You can feel that as you watch them now. The quiet pride in the way one woman smooths her spun yarn and sets it aside, perfectly coiled, like a small miracle. Historians still debate how organized Persian textile production truly was. Some believe there were royal workshops, state-run weaving centers staffed by skilled artisans who produced fabric for the king and his court. Others argue that much of the weaving happened at the household level, decentralized but deeply traditional. Maybe both were true. The empire was too vast, too varied to fit neatly into one model. Like any woven cloth, its strength came from countless interlocking threads. The moon rises high, silvering the fields where sheep now rest. The stream murmurs nearby, soft and constant. You lie back against the earth and imagine the journey of a single fiber, from the animal's back to the hands of a weaver, through the loom, into a garment, and finally to the shoulders of a king. That tiny thread has witnessed everything: heat, labor, laughter, and power. Somewhere in the darkness, a shepherd begins to play a flute made of reed. The sound drifts through the air, simple and haunting. You close your eyes. You can almost hear the empire breathing, one vast, slow rhythm, like the rise and fall of a spindle's spin. And just before sleep takes you, you realize every civilization begins with something humble: a seed, a story, a strand of wool. And tonight, you're holding one of those threads, feeling its weightless strength between your fingers. The sun climbs higher now, and you find yourself standing beside a group of women in the courtyard of a small village house. The walls around you are made of mud brick, cool to the touch, and the air smells faintly of straw, goat milk, and wet wool. You can hear laughter, gentle, low, rhythmic, the kind that comes not from a joke, but from shared routine. They are spinning. It doesn't look complicated, but once you try, you realize just how much quiet mastery it takes. Each woman holds a small spindle, a stick with a weighted disc at the bottom, and a fluffy bundle of carded wool. She draws out a few fibers, twists them between her fingers, gives the spindle a flick, and the twist travels up the strand like a living thing. The spindle spins, whirring softly, its shadow circling the ground like the hand of a clock. This is the pulse of Persian life, steady and patient. You try to mimic her movement, and predictably, your thread breaks after 3 seconds. The woman chuckles softly. She takes your failed strand, smooths it with her fingers, and joins it to another, spinning again without pause. The thread strengthens, lengthens, and becomes whole. "You must not rush," she says. "The fiber feels your impatience." You nod solemnly, pretending to understand. Spinning was often women's work in ancient Persia, but that phrase hides the artistry behind it. It was a skill taught from childhood, passed through generations like a secret language. Archaeologists have found thousands of spindle whorls scattered across the old Persian heartlands, tiny clay or stone discs no bigger than a coin, yet each one a witness to countless hours of motion and rhythm. Here's a mainstream historical fact to anchor your imagination. Spinning was so essential that even in royal palaces, records mention groups of female workers assigned to textile production. In Persepolis, administrative tablets written in Elamite script list rations for spinners of wool and spinners of linen. Some were local women, others were captives from faraway lands: Egyptians, Babylonians, Greeks. Empires didn't just collect gold, they collected skilled hands. But not every spinner worked in a palace. Most sat just like these women do now, in the open air, chatting as they twist fibers into thread. The courtyard hums with small conversation. Someone mentions the coming festival. Another talks about her child's new sandals. The spindle never stops turning. It's both tool and companion. Something to do while thinking, dreaming, or complaining about your neighbor's goat that keeps eating your flax plants. A quirky tidbit for your late-night amusement: some Persian spinners used a dab of honey or gum on their fingers to help grip the slippery flax fibers. Imagine sitting in the heat, your hands sticky and sweet, while bees hover suspiciously close. No wonder spinning took patience. You watch one woman, older, silver streaks in her hair, as she holds up a newly finished skein. The thread is surprisingly fine, strong, and even. She hangs it carefully over a wooden rod to rest, letting the twist settle. The air shimmers with dust motes, and the faint creak of her spindle continues like a lullaby. The whole scene is hypnotic, repetition becoming music. Some historians still argue whether spinning was considered a humble domestic duty or a respected art in Persian society. On one hand, it was common work, expected of nearly every woman. On the other, the skill was crucial to the empire's economy. Without spinners, there were no weavers, no merchants, no royal robes. Perhaps it was both, ordinary and sacred at once, like breathing. You glance toward the shade of a fig tree, where a few men repair farming tools. One of them teases the spinners, calling out something about how slow they are. The oldest woman doesn't even look up. "We could stop," she says mildly, "and then you'll be naked for the winter." The laughter that follows is deep and genuine. A light breeze passes through the courtyard, lifting strands of wool into the air. For a moment, they float like tiny clouds, catching the sunlight. You reach out to touch one. It's warm, impossibly soft. Each thread spun today will eventually be woven into something greater: a tunic, a rug, a tapestry. You realize that this entire civilization depends on that quiet, rhythmic spin. You follow one of the spinners as she stands and walks inside. Her house is dim and cool, the walls hung with half-finished skeins. She sets down her spindle and starts sorting bundles by thickness. Some are coarse, meant for rugs or tents. Others are delicate enough to sew with. She hums as she works, the tune simple but soothing. You almost start to drift off, your eyelids heavy with the rhythm of her movements. In one corner sits an older loom, wooden, rough, but functional. The woman touches it fondly, as though greeting an old friend. "My grandmother's," she says softly, "still works." You can tell it's true. The tension cords are frayed, but the frame stands firm. She explains that once enough thread is spun, the real magic begins, the weaving. But that will come later. For now, everything starts with this moment, the patient twist between thumb and forefinger. It's remarkable how something so simple could shape the fate of kings. Persian armies marched in uniforms woven from wool spun in villages like this. Royal processions shimmered with linen garments that began as humble flax stalks. Even tribute cloths sent from conquered provinces often started as thread made by women who would never see the royal court. Every empire is built on invisible labor, And here you're watching one of its most delicate foundations. Outside, a group of children play near a pile of unwashed fleece. One picks up a spindle and imitates the women, tongue stuck out in concentration. The spindle wobbles, tangles, and falls. Everyone laughs. "You'll learn," someone says. "You have time." It's easy to forget that for these families, time flows differently. The same work, the same tools, the same songs, century after century. Historians still puzzle over how Persian spinners managed such fine consistency without modern tools. Some believe they used oil or water to control static and tension. Others think it was simply muscle memory built over years of repetition. Perhaps both are true. Your modern gadgets and algorithms can't compete with the grandmother's hands that have spun 30 winters worth of yarn. You sit again, this time beside the woman with silver hair. She hands you her spindle and says, "Try again." You take a deep breath, roll the fibers, flick your wrist. The spindle hums. The thread holds for a few glorious seconds before snapping again. She laughs quietly, ties the ends together, and says, "Now it is stronger." You smile, realizing how much that sounds like life advice. As the day fades, the courtyard glows in amber light. Finished skeins hang from the rafters like captured sunlight. Somewhere nearby, a loom creaks, a preview of what's to come. The air cools, filled with the faint scent of wool oil and dust. The women pack up their tools, still talking, still laughing. One carries her spindle tucked neatly into her sash, as if she might start spinning again on the walk home. You watch her disappear into the gathering dusk, and the thought settles over you like a blanket. History isn't only written in stone. Sometimes it's spun in silence, in circles, in the steady twist of a spindle beneath tired hands. And as you drift deeper into the scene, eyelids heavy, you realize how soothing that sound has become. The soft whir, the brush of fiber, the patient hum of creation. Somewhere between spin and stillness, between labor and rest, Persia begins to weave its soul. The next morning, the air is thick with warmth and the scent of dust. You follow the faint thudding rhythm of wood on wood, a sound that grows steadier the closer you walk toward it. Around the corner, sunlight spills across a courtyard where half a dozen looms stand like silent skeletons, their wooden frames creaking under the slow dance of the weaver's hands. This is where the spun thread finds its purpose, on the loom. You can hear it before you fully see it. The gentle clack of heddles, the dull thump of the beater bar, and the faint rustle of fabric growing line by line. The rhythm feels alive, almost like breathing. For a second, you stand there, mesmerized, before one of the women waves you closer with a grin. "If you're just going to stare," she says, "at least bring me some shade." The loom itself looks deceptively simple. A wooden frame anchored by pegs, strings stretched tight like a harp. The weaver sits cross-legged, one hand guiding the shuttle through, the other tapping the heddle stick in a rhythm older than writing. Back and forth, up and down, over and under. Each motion so practiced that her body seems to do it on its own, while her mind wanders elsewhere. Maybe to the market, maybe to dinner, maybe to nothing at all. You crouch beside her, the sun warming your shoulders, and realize that this work is slow but deeply intentional. Each thread of warp holds tension, like 1,000 tiny heartbeats waiting for release. When the shuttle slides through, it's like a sigh, small, inevitable, beautiful. Here's a mainstream historical fact to keep your curiosity awake. By the Achaemenid period, Persia had already perfected several loom types: horizontal ground looms for simple cloth and upright looms for more complex designs. Excavations from places like Persepolis and Susa have even uncovered carved reliefs showing weavers at work, confirming that textile production wasn't just a domestic affair, it was industrial-scale artistry. Entire workshops existed solely to produce garments for the court and the army. The weaver in front of you pulls the shuttle back again, her movements unhurried. You see, she murmurs, every mistake shows forever, so we do not rush. She tugs lightly on the edge of her work, tightening a loose thread. This one is for a merchant's wife. She paid for red borders, expensive, but too bright for my taste. You lean in and notice the faint shimmer of dyed thread woven into the base cloth. Even at this stage, the pattern is emerging. Diamonds, small and even, forming like stars at dusk. A little girl, perhaps her daughter, sits nearby, carding more wool for future projects. She hums a song in a minor key, the kind that never leaves your head. The words drift through the air, something about patience, something about strength. You don't need to understand the language to feel its meaning. A quirky tidbit for those who collect the odd corners of history: some Persian weavers apparently added a deliberate flaw into their designs, a small imperfection somewhere in the pattern. The reason? To show humility before the divine. Only the gods, after all, could make something truly perfect. You imagine a hidden stitch slightly out of place in a royal robe, a tiny wink of humanity beneath all the grandeur. As you watch, the light changes. The sun arcs across the courtyard, shadows of the looms stretching long and thin. Other weavers call out from nearby, trading gossip and jokes between beats of their work. Someone mentions a neighbor's sheep getting loose again. Another laughs that her husband once tried to weave and tangled the whole warp so badly they used it for firewood. There's camaraderie here, a sense that the weaving itself is a conversation, one thread talking to another across time. Historians still argue whether Persian weaving techniques were influenced more by Mesopotamia or by the Central Asian tribes who roamed the steppes. The truth, as usual, is probably both. Persian artisans were master synthesizers. They took what worked from anywhere and made it their own. In weaving, that meant combining structure and style. Sturdy Mesopotamian looms meeting the bold geometric designs favored by nomads. The result? Fabrics that were both durable and breathtaking, fit for tents, trade, and thrones alike. You watch one man across the courtyard tending to an upright loom. His hands move differently, faster, more rhythmic. His fabric is thicker, clearly meant for rugs or saddle blankets. The patterns are bold, diamonds, zigzags, and the occasional stylized ram's horn. The warp threads are made of strong goat hair, the weft of dyed wool. When he finishes a section, he leans back and wipes his forehead, leaving a streak of red dye across his skin like war paint. He catches your amused look and shrugs. Cheaper than real makeup, he says. The smell here is earthy. Dust, wool, sun-warmed wood, and faint traces of dye. It's strangely soothing. You start to notice how your breathing aligns with the rhythm of the looms, how each beat feels like a heartbeat under your ribs. There's something hypnotic about it, something that draws you into the very weave of the world. A group of younger apprentices enter the courtyard, carrying bundles of thread. They set them down carefully beside each loom, then watch the older weavers in silence. One boy, maybe 13, tries to copy the hand motions in the air. The master weaver glances up, pretending not to notice, then quietly says, "Good. Keep your hands learning, even when your head is elsewhere." You can tell that advice has been passed down for generations. Afternoon melts into evening. The courtyard glows amber. Finished cloth hangs from lines above, like banners of captured sunlight. Each piece tells a story. The smooth weave of a soldier's cloak, the intricate pattern for a noble's robe, the rough texture of a tent panel destined for a caravan. You reach out and touch one. The fibers are soft, yet sturdy, the texture rich beneath your fingertips. It's not just fabric, it's memory. Historians still debate the scale of Persia's textile export. Some argue that fine Persian fabrics traveled as far as Greece and Egypt even before the Silk Road was formalized. Others believe these were mostly local luxuries, confined within the empire's vast borders. Either way, it's clear that Persia's reputation for craftsmanship spread far beyond its deserts. When someone in Athens wanted to describe luxury, they often said, like the Persians wear. The woman at the loom finishes her final row for the day. She ties off the edge, cuts the thread with a small bronze knife, and leans back, stretching her arms. Enough, she sighs. The cloth will wait. It always does. You realize that this small moment of rest is as eternal as the empire itself. She offers you a seat on a low stool and pours a cup of barley tea. The taste is mild, faintly sweet. You sit in companionable silence, the only sound the faint creak of looms settling as the day cools. Beyond the courtyard, goats bleat and children call, their voices soft and distant. The air is heavy with the smell of wool and evening dust. You look around once more at the finished fabrics hanging in rows, rippling gently in the breeze. They move like ghosts, like the memories of hands that spun, dyed, and wove them. Each one a fragment of the empire's heartbeat, preserved in thread. As night falls, the last light of the day catches in the threads, turning them gold for an instant before the darkness claims them. The looms grow quiet, and the weavers drift away, leaving only the sound of crickets and the faint whisper of fabric in the wind. You sit there a little longer, half awake, half asleep, listening to the slow rhythm fade into stillness. And just as your eyes begin to close, you can almost feel it, the universe itself, weaving its endless tapestry, one strand at a time. The following morning unfolds like the quiet turning of a page. Dawn filters softly through the lattice windows, spilling gold across the woven mats. Outside, the air hums faintly with life. Merchants shouting greetings, donkeys clattering over cobblestones, and the faint sizzle of bread on an open griddle. You rise slowly, still wrapped in the drowsy calm of yesterday's weaving courtyard. Today, though, the rhythm will change. Today, you are headed to the market, the living heart of the Achaemenid city. By the time you reach the bazaar, the sun has climbed high enough to light every corner in shades of brass. It's not a single street, but a labyrinth, a maze of awnings and archways, stalls and shouting voices. Here, the empire breathes through trade. Goods from far-off lands jostle for attention. Indian ivory, Babylonian pottery, Egyptian linen, Greek olive oil, and the deep, unmistakable gleam of Persian metalwork. The first thing that hits you is the scent. A swirling mix of spice, sweat, and something sweet. Cinnamon and dates, roasted nuts, and dried figs. Somewhere nearby, someone is pounding herbs with a mortar and pestle, their rhythmic thuds echoing like distant drums. You pause at a fabric stall. Bolts of cloth hang in dazzling display. Indigo-dyed linens, deep crimson silks, and the soft sheen of wool from the weaver's courtyard you visited before. The merchant, an older man with bright eyes and a quick smile, waves you closer. "Touch it," he urges, lifting a fold of silk toward you. From Susa, the best weave in the empire. "It's lighter than air, cool beneath your fingers." You nod appreciatively, and he grins, already sensing your curiosity. "They say each thread knows its place," he continues, "like soldiers in the king's army. Order, discipline, harmony. This is Persian craft." He gestures to a neighboring stall. "But go there if you want color. My cousin's wife dyes better than the gods themselves." You smile at his pride and drift onward, deeper into the market's pulse. Everywhere you turn, voices rise and fall, bargaining, teasing, haggling. A woman sells pomegranates with the confidence of a queen, slicing one open to reveal its jewel-red seeds glinting like rubies. Children dart between stalls carrying small clay jars, laughing as they sneak tastes of honey. A group of traders stand in a circle, weighing silver coins and speaking a blend of tongues, Persian, Aramaic, Greek. That's the wonder of it. Persia's markets are not local, they are global, centuries before the world will use that word. From Sardis to Bactria, from the Indus to the Nile, traders crossed the empire under the protection of the Royal Road, that vast highway of stone and dust built by Darius himself. Couriers can carry messages across thousands of kilometers in mere days. Merchants, in turn, carry not just goods but ideas, stories, words, fashions, and gods. You stop beside a stall where a young craftsman is hammering metal. Sparks leap from his anvil, briefly bright against the morning haze. He is shaping a bracelet, each strike measured and deliberate. Copper, you ask? He shakes his head. Bronze, for a noble's daughter. See how it bends? Strong, but not stubborn. Nearby, his apprentice polishes finished wares, bowls, mirrors, pins, and delicate combs. Some bear etched designs of lions and griffins, creatures sacred to Persian royalty. The boy catches you staring and proudly holds one up. Look, he says, the lion is for strength. The wings, those are freedom. You wear this, you carry both. It's a poetic sentiment, and it lingers with you as you move along. Across the square, the hum deepens into a roar. That's where the food vendors gather. There's a stand offering skewers of lamb sizzling over charcoal, another ladling out lentil stew thick with cumin. The aroma alone is enough to make your stomach remind you how long you've been walking. You accept a flat round of bread, warm, crisp-edged, from a smiling woman who insists you try it with goat cheese. The first bite melts into something simple and perfect. Bread and cheese, she says, is all anyone needs before a journey. Then she pauses, squints at you. You look like a traveler. Where from? Far away, you answer, and she laughs. Aren't we all? For a moment, the noise fades. The laughter, the clatter of trade, the rhythm of hammer and drum all seem to blend into a single living hum. You realize that this market isn't just a place for commerce. It's where Persia gathers its own reflection. Every voice, every coin, every trade is a thread in the empire's tapestry. A little farther on, the scent shifts again, this time toward the rich tang of dyes. You find a dyer's stall where earthen vats bubble in shades of red, blue, and green. A man with forearms stained in every color imaginable stirs one with a long wooden rod. Madder root for red, he explains, indigo for blue, pomegranate rind for yellow. He pulls out a strip of cloth, dripping crimson, and hangs it beside others to dry. The sunlight catches them, and suddenly the whole stall is glowing. He chuckles when he sees your awe. You know, he says, the king himself once sent for our dye. Claimed no red in Babylon could match it. I told his messenger, that's because Babylon has no Persian soil. He laughs again, but there's pride beneath the joke, the kind that runs deep, the pride of craftsmanship that endures across empires. As midday passes, you wander toward the quieter edges of the market. The noise softens, the stalls grow fewer, replaced by small workshops and courtyards. Here, artisans work not for tourists, but for legacy. You peer into a workshop where a potter shapes clay with slow, steady pressure. Each spin of his wheel smooths the surface, forming bowls, jars, and cups that will outlast their makers. The smell of wet earth and smoke fills the air. He looks up briefly and nods. Careful, he warns with a half smile. Clay remembers every touch, even the unkind ones. You watch him smooth away a tiny imperfection with the edge of his thumb. That line, clay remembers, sticks with you. In a way, everything here remembers. The looms, the dyes, the metals, the roads. The Persians had a word, quarana, meaning divine glory or radiant fortune, the unseen light that follows great works and righteous lives. You wonder if perhaps this market, with all its noise and dust and laughter, glows faintly with that same invisible light. A historical note flickers through your thoughts. Herodotus once marveled at the Persians' adaptability. their ability to learn from every people they conquered. From the Babylonians, they took science. From the Egyptians, art and architecture. From the Greeks, philosophy. And in the markets, all of it met. Commerce was not just the exchange of goods, it was the empire's bloodstream. As the sun begins to lower, the light grows soft and gold again. Merchants start packing away their wares, covering their stalls with cloth. The air cools, carrying the faint scent of evening fires and roasting grains. A group of musicians gathers near the center square, flute, drum, and string. The melody is simple but haunting, rising and falling like the call of distant mountains. Children dance, small feet kicking up dust. You stand at the edge, still holding the last piece of your bread, watching. You realize that what feels like chaos at first, the shouting, the bargaining, the heat, is actually harmony. Every movement, every word is part of a greater rhythm. Before you leave, you glance back at the fabric stall where you began. The merchant catches your eye and raises a hand in farewell. Behind him, the silks shimmer like sunset caught in thread. As you turn away, the market fades into twilight. The last calls of traders echo faintly behind you. You walk slowly, the taste of honey still lingering, the murmur of commerce still humming in your ears. You think of the weavers, the dyers, the potters, the smiths, all of them working not for glory, but for continuity, for the quiet joy of making, for the beauty of leaving something behind that endures. And as the stars appear, you realize this truth. Empires fall, roads crumble, languages vanish, but a well-made thing, woven or forged or baked with care, can whisper across millennia. The looms and markets of Persia may be silent now, but their rhythm endures. In every cloth that rustles, every coin that rings, every thread of history that still binds the world together. Evening folds softly over the rooftops of Persepolis, washing the city in bronze and rose. The shadows stretch long across the marble courtyards, and somewhere the sound of sandals scuffs against polished stone. You move toward the palace district, where the hum of the market gives way to quieter, more deliberate sounds. The whisper of silk against silk, the faint click of needles, the rhythmic rip of cloth being cut. You've entered the world of the tailors of the court. The air here feels different, cooler, perfumed faintly with cedar and oil. Inside a vast open hall, light filters through latticed windows and catches on fine dust, turning it to gold. This is no marketplace. There are no haggling voices, no laughter, only concentration. You find rows of craftsmen seated cross-legged on woven mats, their hands moving with steady grace. Rolls of fabric lie in ordered stacks, linen, wool, and that elusive, shimmery silk imported from the east. A man with a short, trimmed beard glances up as you enter. He doesn't speak right away. Instead, he measures you with his eyes, the way only a tailor can. Then he nods toward an empty spot near a loom. "You're curious," he says. "Sit, watch how kings are dressed." You settle in, the faint crackle of the oil lamps around you mingling with the soft hum of fabric being drawn across the floor. The tailor picks up a bronze measuring rod, its edges worn smooth from years of use. "We begin with precision," he murmurs, as though to himself. "No guesswork. The robe must speak before the wearer does." He lays the rod across a length of deep blue cloth. "This," he says, "is for one of the king's guards, linen reinforced with wool threads, strong, flexible, light enough for movement, and the color? Blue, the shade of loyalty." He traces a line with chalk, so faint you can barely see it. Then, with a slow, patient motion, he cuts. The sound is soft but certain, a whisper of division that feels sacred somehow. In a corner of the hall, another group works on something grander. You rise and move closer, drawn by the gleam of gold thread. It's embroidery, tiny stitches forming a field of lions and winged bulls. A young woman, her dark hair tied neatly behind her head, sits hunched over the fabric. Her fingers dancing so quickly it's almost hypnotic. You can see the image growing, the creatures taking form, their outlines as fine as inkwork. Each robe takes months, she says quietly without looking up. This one will be worn only once, during the New Year festival. She pauses to thread her needle again. After that, it will be stored, or burned, depends on what omens the priests find. You blink? Burned? She smiles faintly. Yes, sometimes garments absorb too much energy, too much attention. Better to let the smoke return it to the air. It's a strange but elegant logic, the idea that even clothes could be spiritual conductors. Historians still argue whether Persian garments carried ritual significance beyond symbolism, but in a place like this, you can almost feel it. Each fold, each stitch, an offering to order itself. One of the older men chuckles when he overhears. Superstition, mostly, he mutters, but it keeps the apprentices humble. He gestures toward the half-finished robe before him. See these edges? Always finished, even the ones no one will see. That's how you honor the craft. You lean closer and notice how the seams are perfectly smooth, invisible from both sides. The detail is astonishing, precision bordering on obsession. A fringe detail catches your eye, tiny bronze beads woven into a border. Decoration, you ask? Decoration, yes, he says, but also identity. Each rank, each role has its own pattern. A satrap's hem differs from a priest's. Soldiers wear shorter sleeves, easier for the sword arm. And women of the royal court? He pauses, glancing over his shoulder to make sure no one important is listening. They compete with each other more fiercely than the men ever do. Whoever wears the most intricate stitch wins the queen's notice, or envy. You can't help but smile. So even in the palace, fashion politics? He chuckles, especially in the palace. Empires may rise and fall, but the art of showing off? That never changes. The joke earns a few quiet laughs from the others. The air lightens for a moment. Someone hums a tune under their breath. An old lullaby, you think, and the rhythm of the work resumes. You wander deeper into the hall. Along one wall stands a long table scattered with pigments, brushes, and scraps of dyed thread. A scribe sits nearby, carefully sketching garment patterns on thin parchment. His stylus moves with deliberate care, annotating notes in Old Persian script. We record every royal design, he explains when you draw near. Each robe is documented, who wore it, when, for what occasion. Even the dyes are listed. He lifts one of the parchments toward you. The drawing shows a tall figure in layered robes, embroidered with stars and lions, annotated with notes in a neat hand. This, he says, was for Xerxes himself. The details are mesmerizing. The collar lined in gold thread, the cuffs stiffened with fine leather, the inner robe a contrasting shade of ivory. You know, he adds, almost casually, some say the great king's tailors numbered in the hundreds, others say thousands. He leans back with a grin. Historians still argue whether that's exaggeration or pride, but I've seen the wardrobes. Trust me, it's not exaggeration. You imagine it. Corridors lined with garments, each one a small masterpiece. The scale of it borders on absurd. Yet it fits the image of Persia, an empire built not just on conquest, but on presentation. A servant enters quietly, carrying a tray of folded cloth. The tailor you first met inspects each one, nodding approvingly. "Delivery from Babylon," he says. "Their linen is softer than ours this season." He looks back at you. "The court may claim Persian perfection, But the truth is, he lowers his voice conspiratorially, we borrow from everyone. Egyptian weave, Median cuts, Greek belts. The king's robe is the world itself, stitched together. You grin. Global fashion before globalization. He raises an eyebrow. Whatever that means. A shared laugh drifts between you. In the courtyard outside, the last light fades into indigo. Apprentices begin folding away their fabrics, sweeping the stone floor with broad palm brooms. One boy struggles to roll a massive bolt of wool and finally sighs. Master, he groans, it's too heavy. The older man doesn't even glance up. Then you will be strong tomorrow. It's not meant harshly, it's simply fact. Perseverance is part of the trade. You stay long enough to watch the lamps being lit, one by one. Their glow deepens the gold of the threads and softens the lines of the workers' faces. For a brief moment, the hall feels like a temple. And perhaps, in a sense, it is. Tailoring in ancient Persia wasn't just about clothing. It was architecture in miniature. The folds of a robe were like columns, the embroidery like reliefs on a palace wall. To craft something fit for the king was to participate in empire making itself, stitch by patient stitch. A stray breeze slips through the lattices, stirring the hanging silks. They ripple, catching the lamplight like water. The sound is almost like a sigh. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sensations sink in. The scent of oil and linen, the hum of quiet voices, the rhythmic slide of thread through fabric. There's something timeless about it. You could be anywhere, any century, and still recognize the gesture of creation. As the last tailor ties off his thread and sets his needle down, you sense the end of the day's rhythm. Tomorrow, new fabric will arrive, new patterns will be drawn. The work never ends, but somehow that feels comforting, predictable, eternal. You rise and thank your host. He waves it off. No need, he says with a tired smile. The robe thanks you for noticing. Outside, Persepolis glows faintly in the moonlight. The night air smells of jasmine and distant smoke. Somewhere in the city, the king prepares for another ceremony, another appearance that will demand another perfect garment. Inside the workshop, the tailors are already dreaming of thread and form. You walk away slowly, thinking about how much meaning can hide in something as simple as a sleeve. And somewhere behind you, the looms begin again, steady, eternal, humming softly into the night. You wake to the sound of footsteps crunching on gravel and the soft, rhythmic clinking of camel bells. The air smells different now, dry, sharper, infused with dust and distant smoke. Dawn spreads pale and wide across a desert road stretching toward the horizon. You're far from the palaces of Persepolis now, far from the tailor's gentle precision. Out here, the empire breathes through motion, trade, exchange, and the endless flow of goods along the arteries that connect Persia to the world. You've joined a caravan heading east toward lands where silk shimmers like captured moonlight.
The caravan master, a broad-shouldered man with a weather-beaten face, greets you with a nod. We follow the royal road, he says, patting the neck of his camel, from Sardis to Susa and beyond. The king's road, older than your grandmother's secrets. He grins at his own joke. If you're lucky, you'll reach the end with all your belongings and most of your patience.
The road unspools before you in tones of gold and beige. Every few miles, you pass a stone marker carved with the symbol of the winged lion, the imperial sign that promises safety to travelers. It's said that couriers of the great king can ride from one end of the empire to the other in less than 2 weeks, changing horses at way stations built precisely for that purpose. You, however, are not a courier. You are a wanderer, and your pace is humble. The day grows warm. The desert hums softly, alive with unseen life, crickets, distant birds, a faint whisper of wind over sand. The camels move in rhythm, their hooves pressing soft impressions into the dust that have already been pressed 1,000 times before. At midday, the caravan halts beside a small oasis, a cluster of palms circling a pool of still water. Traders unload their wares, sacks of spices, bundles of wool, bolts of linen, jars of honey sealed with clay. You notice several carefully wrapped parcels marked with foreign script. Silk, the caravan master tells you, from the lands beyond Bactria. Fragile, priceless, light as a whisper. The Chinese guard it like treasure, but a clever trader always finds a way. He grins again, but this time there's reverence behind the humor. Silk is more than cloth, it's myth. For Persians, it's a thing half believed, half dreamed. Soft as air, finer than spider thread, glowing faintly even in shadow. Historians still argue whether the earliest Persians truly understood silk's origin, or if they thought it spun by divine insects living in far-off forests. You dip your fingers into the water, letting the coolness climb your arm. In the reflection, the traders move slowly, their robes fluttering in muted colors, saffron, teal, and white. Among them, a young woman carefully unwraps a piece of the prized fabric. It gleams even under the harsh sunlight, shifting between silver and rose. Careful, she warns, the air itself might tear it. She runs a fingertip across the weave. See the way it catches the light? That's not just beauty, it's power. You tilt your head. Power? Of course, she says. You show up at court wearing this, and people don't just see silk. They see the road you command, the traders you know, the distance you can cross without leaving your seat. It's a clever insight. The Persians have always understood that fashion is not vanity, it's communication. What you wear tells the world how far your reach goes. Silk, then, is the language of influence. As the afternoon stretches on, the caravan moves again. You pass watchtowers manned by the king's soldiers, their bronze helmets glinting under the sun. One calls out lazily, "Safe travels! Watch for bandits past the next valley." A warning given with the same cheer as a neighbor reminding you to bring an umbrella. The road dips, then rises again, winding between low hills of reddish stone. The landscape shifts subtly. Tufts of dry grass, a sudden cluster of thorny bushes, the glimmer of another stream. The empire is vast enough that even the desert changes moods every few miles. By evening, you reach a caravanserai, a stone inn built for travelers. Inside, the air is cool, and the walls echo with murmured languages from every corner of the known world. A group of merchants from India share a low table, eating rice and lentils with their hands. A pair of Greek envoys argue over wine and philosophy in equally slurred tones. Near the corner, a Babylonian scribe writes notes by lamplight, muttering prices and weights under his breath. You find a place near the central hearth where the caravan master sits, cross-legged, counting coins. "Sit," he says, gesturing with a tired smile. "You've walked enough to earn your supper." He waves over a boy carrying bowls of stew, lentils again, thick with herbs. "Not bad," he says, "considering half the spices came from that poor camel outside." You laugh, almost choking on your spoon. "You mean you feed us the camel's spices, not the camel itself?" "Not yet," he says, eyes glinting. "Depends how long the journey lasts." Laughter ripples through the room. The weariness of travel dissolves for a moment into warmth and shared humor. Even in exhaustion, Persians find the comfort of company, the steady hum of human connection in an empire too large for one voice to echo. Later, as night deepens, the talk turns to trade routes. A merchant spreads a rough map on the ground. "See here," he says, pointing with a bread crust. The Parthians hold this stretch now, but before them, it was all Persian. The road to the east, yes, through Bactria, Sogdiana, and beyond, that's where the silk comes. And from the west, dyes, glass, olive oil. Everything moves, always moves. You notice how his fingers trace invisible lines across the map. Those routes aren't just roads, they're veins. The empire survives because of this movement, the flow of materials and meaning across impossible distances. There's a brief silence, then someone adds softly, "And people. Don't forget the people." It's true. Along with silk and spices, travel stories, faiths, rumors, songs. Somewhere on this same road, Greek physicians share medical knowledge with Persian scholars. Egyptian artisans trade techniques with Median sculptors. Even the idea of writing shifts and morphs as clay tablets give way to parchment and ink. Trade isn't just commerce, it's conversation. The fire burns low. You stretch out on your mat, watching the smoke curl toward the ceiling. The faint scent of burning cedar mixes with the dry smell of dust still clinging to your clothes. Someone hums a tune, low, wordless, steady as breathing. The sound joins the whisper of wind slipping through the cracks of the old stone walls. You close your eyes and imagine the road continuing beyond this inn, threading through mountains and valleys, touching cities whose names you'll never know. Somewhere far east, the silk you saw today will be unwound from cocoons in careful hands, boiled and spun, dyed and dried under another sky. Somewhere far west, a noble will hold that same silk and marvel at its softness, never knowing how many lives it touched before reaching them. That's the quiet magic of the Persian trade routes. They turn distance into connection, thread into empire. Historians still debate whether Persia can truly claim to have started the Silk Road, or if the road began long before, in smaller, humbler exchanges. But perhaps it doesn't matter. The truth is that Persia gave the world its first great network of exchange, a physical web of human cooperation. Every caravan, every market, every dyed cloth was part of a design too vast for any one person to see. You drift towards sleep listening to the sounds of the caravanserai, the rustle of blankets, the muffled snores of men who've walked too far, and the soft breathing of camels outside. Tomorrow, you'll walk again. Maybe east, maybe back toward the cities. The direction hardly matters, because on the royal road, every path leads to someone else's beginning. You turn slightly, and the faint scent of silk lingers on your sleeve, impossible to forget. You think of the tailor's words, the robe as the world itself, stitched together. Out here, on the road that connects every kingdom, you finally understand what he meant. Morning light spills across the edge of a carved stone terrace as you return westward, following the road back toward the heart of the empire. The journey has left a thin crust of dust on your cloak, the kind that clings no matter how many times you shake it out. Yet, when the familiar spires of Persepolis appear in the distance, golden and calm under the rising sun, you can't help but feel a small flutter of awe. You've seen the materials of Persian life, the wool, the dyes, the silks traded across continents. But now, back in the city, you begin to notice something different. The stories stitched into those fabrics. Every fold and pattern, every embroidered curve of thread seems to speak in a visual language all its own. These aren't mere decorations, they're messages. Your feet lead you toward the royal quarter again, drawn by a soft rhythm that feels almost like music. You turn a corner and find yourself before a long colonnade where sunlight pools through open arches. Beneath them, a group of weavers sits cross-legged, working on massive tapestries that nearly cover the stone walls. Their hands move with the same calm precision you've come to recognize. The quiet hum of those who know time bends to their patience. The tapestry nearest you depicts a lion attacking a bull, a motif you've seen carved into the palace reliefs as well. One of the weavers, an older woman with silver-threaded hair, notices your gaze and smiles faintly. "It's not just a fight," she says. "It's the year devouring the old one. The lion is spring, the bull winter." You tilt your head. "So it's a calendar?" "In a way," she replies. "It's also a prayer. Renewal, balance, the empire's strength repeating itself. Every Persian knows this symbol. It's woven into our walls, our robes, even our coins." She runs her palm gently over the lion's mane. Power can roar quietly if you know where to look. You watch her hands as she works, pulling threads of gold and ochre through the fabric. The texture catches the light in shifting tones, alive, almost breathing. "Each color means something too," she continues. "Blue is truth, green is life, red is courage. The king's robes combine all three, of course. He has to be everything at once." There's a quiet humor in her voice. You imagine her teaching apprentices who take everything too seriously, warning them that a thread out of place could offend the gods. You move along the terrace, pausing at other works in progress. One tapestry shows a garden bursting with vines and flowers, another a winged figure holding a ring. "That's Ahura Mazda," someone murmurs behind you, "the Lord of Wisdom." You glance back to see a young scribe sketching the same image on a clay tablet. "Does the king believe the god actually wears these symbols?" you ask. The scribe shrugs, smiling faintly. Who knows? Historians still argue whether these patterns are worship or propaganda. But maybe it doesn't matter. The important thing is that when the people see the robe, they remember who keeps the world in order. You nod slowly. The idea makes sense. In a land as vast as Persia, a robe or a seal or a tapestry can carry meaning farther than 1,000 messengers. You leave the terrace and wander deeper into the palace. Guards in pleated robes stand watch, their spears gleaming in the light. Their garments bear simple geometric patterns, woven bands of alternating color. Not decorative exactly, but purposeful. You catch snippets of conversation among them. Casual remarks about the heat, about supper, about how the embroidery itches when it rains. Even royal symbolism, it seems, has practical flaws. Beyond them lies the Hall of 100 Columns, a place so enormous that your footsteps echo like distant thunder. The floor is cool beneath your sandals, and the pillars rise like a forest of stone, each carved with intricate reliefs. Along the walls, you notice faint traces of color, tiny flecks of blue and red clinging stubbornly to the carvings. Once, the entire hall must have blazed with paint and woven hangings. You close your eyes and try to imagine it. Banners of crimson silk fluttering from the ceiling, golden tassels glinting in the torchlight, the air rich with incense and whispers. And through it all, the royal robes, the living extension of the hall's design. A court historian once described Darius the Great's ceremonial robe as the sky brought to earth. You can see why. It wasn't just clothing. It was a visual declaration of cosmic order. Stars, eagles, lions, flowers, all stitched with meaning. Power was never naked in Persia. It was clothed, layered, adorned. You wander toward a smaller side chamber, quieter, lined with low benches and half-finished weavings. Here, younger artisans practice their craft, repeating motifs like students memorizing sacred verses. A boy of perhaps 12 pauses his work and glances up. "You want to see something strange?" he whispers. Before you can answer, he unrolls a small piece of cloth hidden beneath his mat. It's unlike the others. Its pattern isn't geometric or regal, but chaotic, almost playful. There are fish, clouds, dancing figures, and what looks suspiciously like a monkey wearing a crown. You grin. "That's unusual." He beams. "My uncle says it's from the south, near the sea. People there don't follow the court's rules. They make what feels right." He lowers his voice. "Don't tell the master, though. He says imagination makes for crooked stitches. You laugh softly. Maybe crooked stitches make for better stories. The boy's grin widens. Maybe so. You roll the fabric back up for him, thinking about how even in a world ruled by symmetry and symbolism, a few wild threads always slip through. That's the nature of art. It resists perfection, quietly rebelling through beauty. Outside again, the sun has dipped lower, casting long slants of amber light through the palace corridors. You pass a wall of carved soldiers, the famous immortals, identical in their ranks, yet impossibly detailed up close. Each tunic is decorated with fine rosettes, each belt with tiny repeating motifs. No two faces are exactly the same. The illusion of sameness hides 1,000 subtle differences. It strikes you that this was Persia's genius, the ability to blend unity and individuality, order and imagination, just as their textiles blend pattern and color. You pause at a balcony overlooking the gardens. Below, the royal courtyards bloom in perfect geometry, paths and fountains laid out with mathematical precision. Servants in plain linen tunics move quietly along the shaded walkways, carrying baskets of flowers to refresh the halls. Somewhere, a musician plucks a soft tune on a lute. The sound floats upward, delicate as thread. You lean on the railing and let the scene settle into you. The cool air, the faint scent of myrrh, the rustle of distant fabric. It's easy to see why the Persians loved symbolism so much. Every texture, every color seems to whisper of balance, of the world held gently between chaos and order. A tailor once told you that a single pattern can outlive its maker by centuries. You believe him now. The motifs woven into these walls and garments are more than art. They're memory, collective and quiet. Even when empires fall, the symbols endure, carried in carpets, jewelry, and even modern fabrics whose patterns echo ancient hands. Somewhere deep inside the palace, the older weaver's words return to you. You think about that as the last light fades. The lion and the bull, the god and the king, the threads that tell stories to those who know how to look. The empire's voice isn't loud. It hums beneath the surface, woven into everything it touches. You breathe out slowly, feeling the day ease into twilight. The patterns of power aren't only on the walls or robes anymore. They're in you too, now that you've seen them. And like the best of Persia's threads, the meaning will hold, even when the color fades. You wake to the sound of fabric whispering against stone, a slow, rhythmic brushing that sounds almost like waves. The morning air is cooler here, near the riverbanks of Pasargadae, where the city hums softly at dawn. You rise from your mat, rubbing the sleep from your eyes, and realize the sound isn't the river at all, it's cloth. A group of dyers is already at work downstream, rinsing long bolts of fabric in the shallow water, the surface turning briefly into a painter's palette of swirling blues and greens. You make your way closer. The dyers work with calm efficiency, each motion measured and unhurried. One man holds a wooden rod strung with dripping cloth, the ends dyed in gradient shades that fade like sunset clouds. Another kneads pigment into wet fabric using his bare feet, his ankles stained purple from the day's batch of indigo. The smell is sharp but earthy, fermented dye, damp wool, and river clay. A young apprentice looks up at you and grins. "Careful where you step," he says, pointing to a pit where a dark mixture bubbles lazily. "That's the vat. If you fall in, you'll turn blue for life." You smile. "Wouldn't be the worst souvenir." He laughs and splashes water on a nearby cloth, revealing the transformation as oxygen hits the wet fabric. Greenish at first, then deepening to a rich, unmistakable indigo. "It's like watching the sky being born," he says proudly. You can't help but agree. The Persians treated dyeing as both science and sorcery. The process was secretive, guarded by guilds that passed recipes down through generations. Historians still argue whether the best blues of the empire came from native indigo plants or from imported materials brought along the royal road. But the truth, as with most things here, is probably somewhere in between, a mixture of local craft and global trade. You follow the apprentices as they carry dyed cloth to a nearby terrace where it dries in the sun. Bolts of color ripple in the breeze, reds from madder root, yellows from saffron and pomegranate rinds, greens made from combinations of both. The dyes shimmer subtly, almost alive. A woman with a headscarf tied loosely over her hair supervises the drying process. Her hands are stained every shade of the rainbow, and she seems utterly content with it. Each batch has a mood, she tells you. Red is impatient, it needs attention. Blue prefers solitude. Green takes its time, but never disappoints. You chuckle softly. You make them sound like people. She smiles. They are, in a way. We treat them like companions, not tools. A color can sense if you rush it. You look around, realizing that this quiet philosophy pervades Persian craftsmanship. Patience is not merely a virtue, it's an art form. Every motion, every pause, every choice of thread or pigment seems to carry intention. Beyond the terrace, you spot a row of clay jars half buried in the earth. Fermenting indigo, the woman explains, you have to feed it. Feed it? With sugar, sometimes honey. It needs to breathe, just like us. There's that gentle humor again, the kind that sneaks wisdom into a smile. As you leave the dyers, you follow the path back toward the marketplace where finished fabrics await their new lives. Here, merchants unroll carpets for inspection, each one a story told in wool and silk. The designs are intricate, interlocking stars, hunting scenes, blooming flowers. You can trace entire philosophies of symmetry and cosmology through their patterns. A merchant beckons you over and flips the corner of a large carpet. Camel hair, he says proudly. Soft, yes, woven by nomads near the Caspian. He taps a geometric border. This is their signature. See how the lines repeat but never quite match? That's deliberate. Only the gods make perfect symmetry. You run your fingers along the texture, marveling at the smoothness. The thought of nomads weaving while the wind howls across the steppes lingers in your mind. They may never have seen Persepolis, but their handiwork ends up under the feet of kings. That's the reach of the Persian world, a network of threads stretching from mountains to sea, tying distant hands together in one massive tapestry. You drift toward a stall selling spools of thread, where a young woman spins wool with a drop spindle. Her fingers twist and pull in a rhythm so natural it seems meditative. You ask her if she ever tires of spinning. Never, she says. It's the quiet that I love. You listen long enough, and the thread starts to tell you where it wants to go. You laugh softly. Does it argue with you often? Only when I'm stubborn. A pause. Then she adds, my grandmother said that every time you spin a perfect thread, the world grows a little less tangled. I like to think that's true. You can see how such ideas take root here. To an outsider, it might sound quaint or poetic, but in Persia, where religion, art, and philosophy intertwine, it's simply how people see the world. Threads aren't just materials, they're metaphors. Weaving isn't just craft, it's a way of describing how the universe holds together. As the day warms, you wander into a shaded courtyard where students sit cross-legged around a teacher. He gestures toward a large hanging scroll depicting the royal insignia, a winged figure holding a ring. Now, he says, this is called the Faravahar. It represents the human soul striving for truth. He pauses, letting the words sink in. When we weave or paint it, we're not merely copying a symbol, we're practicing remembrance. Every stitch is a promise to live rightly. You watch as the students nod, some sketching notes on scraps of parchment. The idea that weaving could be moral as well as practical feels strangely comforting. Later, as you rest under a fig tree with a cup of sweet wine, you reflect on how pervasive textiles are in Persian life. They're everywhere, on people, in palaces, across altars, draped from the rafters of humble homes. The empire doesn't just wear its wealth, it breathes it. And yet, even amid all this beauty, there's a quiet fragility. The sun fades the dyes, moths nibble at the threads, sand grinds into every fold. Time, that most patient of weavers, eventually unravels all things. But still, they keep weaving. You recall a rumor you once heard from a Babylonian merchant that Persian kings were buried wrapped in linen, embroidered with stars, so their souls would rise easily to the heavens. Historians still argue whether this practice was real or myth, but as you watch the sunlight glint across a drying line of gold and silk, it doesn't feel impossible. You finish your wine and rise slowly, feeling the warmth of the day settle around you like another kind of fabric. Everywhere you look, there are threads, visible and invisible, linking one life to another, one story to the next. As the afternoon breeze stirs the hanging cloths, they ripple like fields of color. You stand among them, surrounded by the scent of dye and dust and earth, and it feels as if the world itself is exhaling. You reach out and run your hand over one bolt of cloth, newly dyed a luminous crimson. The fibers are still damp, cool to the touch. You imagine it cut and sewn into a robe, worn in a palace, or traded across deserts, or buried as an offering to a forgotten god. Wherever it goes, a part of this day, the laughter of the apprentice, the rhythm of spinning, the murmur of the river, will go with it. For a moment, you close your eyes. The air hums faintly with life, and you think, maybe this is what the Persians understood better than most, that the act of making something, slowly, lovingly, is itself a kind of prayer. And so, as the sun begins to lower once more, you stand quietly among the drying clods, wrapped in 1,000 shades of devotion, patience, and story. Somewhere, a weaver hums, the tune as gentle as silk sliding through fingers. And the world keeps weaving. The morning mist clings softly to the columns of Pasargadae as you stroll through the quieter corners of the city. The air smells of damp earth, stone, and the faint perfume of wildflowers growing near the palace gardens. You notice immediately that the city feels different from Persepolis. The spaces are wider, simpler, less ostentatious. Yet the artistry is just as deliberate. Here, the grandeur lies not in gold, but in the careful harmony of materials, the rhythm of stone and wood, the subtler art of proportion. Your steps lead you to the workshops of the local artisans, a cluster of modest buildings where the empire's quieter crafts thrive. Unlike the royal tailors or the bustling marketplace merchants, these craftspeople work largely for ordinary citizens, clothing, household textiles, and ceremonial garments for local celebrations. The simplicity of the pieces does not lessen their importance. You stop first at a small weaving hall, where the rhythmic clack of looms fills the room. Each loom is a self-contained world of threads, wooden beams, and steady, measured motion. An older weaver beckons you closer, gesturing to a partially finished carpet stretched across the frame. "Notice the pattern," he says softly. "See how the border repeats, but the center tells a different story?" His fingers trace the intricate floral design, worn smooth from years of handling. This is for a family home, not the palace. But every house deserves dignity. Every home deserves a story in its walls. The thought strikes you. Persia is not merely an empire of kings and ceremonies. It is an empire of daily life, stitched and spun into the ordinary as carefully as it is into the extraordinary. Even a small carpet carries cultural memory, echoes of shared aesthetics, and subtle reminders of status and taste. Nearby, a group of apprentices sorts wool into piles of varying thickness. You notice a curious mix of fibers: goat hair, camel, sheep, sometimes blended for texture. The apprentices hum quietly to themselves as they work, And you realize that sound is as integral to the process as the hands moving the threads. Rhythm guides precision. It keeps everyone coordinated.
A young girl looks up at you, her fingers streaked with natural dyes. She holds a strand of indigo between her thumb and forefinger, examining it closely. "The thread is stubborn today," she whispers. "It doesn't want to bend." She giggles and twirls it with more force. "Sometimes it rebels, just like people. You must be gentle but firm." Her words resonate. It's not just the materials that demand care. The act of making requires patience, empathy, and attention. Persian textiles are as much about character as they are about appearance. Historians still argue whether the meticulous repetition of patterns was practical, symbolic, or a form of meditation. Standing here, watching thread and hand move together, it feels like all three. You wander toward a corner of the workshop where several women are embroidering small ceremonial robes. Each stitch is deliberate, each motif precise, yet there is space for individual expression. Tiny birds perch among vines, lions stride beside flowering trees, and a lone monkey sometimes sneaks into the borders, a playful touch that seems entirely Persian. A woman notices your gaze and chuckles. "It's the teacher's little joke," she explains. "He says if the gods are bored, they like to see a monkey." She shakes her head in mock seriousness, then continues stitching, fingers flying over silk and linen. Even small things matter. A misplaced stitch can change a pattern or a story. You kneel beside her to examine the work more closely. The embroidery is fine enough that a slight tremor in the hand could ruin hours of effort. And yet, the stitches are steady, flowing like the river outside. You realize that in every thread lies a dialogue between material, maker, and observer. Every choice, however small, carries weight. Beyond the embroidery, the workshop smells of natural dyes, washed wool, and polished wood. Each smell triggers a memory of your journeys, the markets, the tailor's halls, the drying cloth by the river. It's as though Persia's textile tradition has a persistent presence, a way of leaving traces wherever you go. You notice a set of small, painted containers arranged along a low shelf. The pigments inside are vivid: reds from madder, yellows from saffron, blues from indigo. One apprentice dips her fingers and rubs them against the cloth, testing the color. She hums softly, a low, lilting note that seems to synchronize with the warp and weft. The room feels alive, but in a gentle, contemplative way. This is the quieter side of the empire, the one that thrives without fanfare. A man approaches you, carrying a finished bolt of wool. He holds it up against the sunlight, letting the fibers glow. "This will be for a wedding," he says. "Not a royal one, not yet. But it is important. You can see in the weave that it carries good fortune." You examine it closely. Indeed, the pattern seems to pulse subtly, a mix of straight lines and gentle curves that guides the eye. "Do the people choose the designs?" you ask. He shakes his head. "Mostly we do, but we listen. Every village has its tastes. What pleases one community may offend another. We work quietly, learning what each thread should say." The philosophy strikes you again. It's not enough for the work to exist. It must communicate, harmonize, endure. Even in something as seemingly simple as wool for a household, the artisans carry the weight of culture, memory, and tradition. You walk toward a small courtyard where sunlight spills over drying racks of dyed cloth. The colors glow in the morning light: reds, yellows, greens, blues. You run your fingers over the fibers, feeling the difference between goat hair and camel, wool and linen. Each texture is distinct, but together they form a symphony of sensation. Nearby, an apprentice dips a bolt of fabric into a shallow vat. The dye sizzles faintly as it contacts the fibers, and you watch the color bloom across the cloth like water seeping into sand. "It's alive," she whispers. "You have to watch it,
or it will decide its own destiny. You smile, thinking of the silk you saw along the caravan roads, the embroidered robes in the palace, the playful monkeys hiding among the vines. Persia is alive in thread, in color, in every delicate motion of the artisan's hand. As the sun rises higher, you wander back toward the city streets. Traders begin to set up their stalls, carrying hand-woven textiles to the market. You notice the patterns. They echo what you've seen in workshops and palaces alike. What was learned by one artisan is shared and repeated, yet each piece carries a subtle signature of its maker. Even the ordinary fabric hums with culture, intention, and history. You pause and consider how these quiet acts of creation ripple outward. A single bolt of dyed wool can travel across the empire, from village to palace, touching countless lives. Every stitch, every dye bath, every careful measurement contributes to a network far greater than any one artisan could perceive. Historians still argue whether this spread was intentional or accidental, yet the result is the same. Persia's identity is stitched into every corner of its world. The afternoon warms, and you find a shaded bench beside a fountain. Water ripples gently over stone, mingling with the faint scent of drying wool. You watch as the artisans pack their finished fabrics into bundles for sale. Threads, dyes, and patterns, seemingly ordinary, yet extraordinary in the context of an empire so vast, so interconnected. You breathe deeply, letting the sounds, colors, and textures sink in. Persia is not just power, not just kings and roads and armies. It is patience and subtlety, embedded in the quiet hands that work each thread, that watch each dye bloom, that carry the culture forward without fanfare. And as you lean back, eyes half closed, you realize that even the simplest fabric can carry stories across generations, whispering of history, devotion, and the delicate, enduring art of making something well. The late afternoon sun stretches long shadows across the walls of Ecbatana, painting the city in muted shades of gold and rust. You wander through narrow alleyways lined with small shops, each selling materials and tools for weaving and clothing. The air smells faintly of wood smoke, animal hide, and the earthy tang of freshly dyed fabric. This is a city alive with craft, a quieter heart of the empire, where artisans continue the work begun in the grand palaces, yet for everyday life. You pass a merchant who is unrolling a bolt of camel hair over a wooden frame, demonstrating its softness to a potential buyer. The fibers catch the sun in subtle shifts of brown and ochre. He notices your gaze and nods, gesturing for you to come closer. Camel hair is stronger than sheep's wool, he says, his voice low but certain. It bends without breaking and holds warmth without weight. Perfect for travelers, perfect for soldiers. You run your fingers along the smooth fibers, feeling the natural resilience of the material. There's something deeply satisfying about holding something that is both functional and beautiful. In Persia, utility and art rarely exist in isolation. Every item carries meaning, even if it's as simple as a cloak or a sack. Historians still argue whether the preference for camel hair over other materials was due to practical necessity, climate, or the subtle prestige associated with nomadic trade. Standing here, you suspect it was all three. A small group of women sits on the ground nearby, spinning wool into thread with drop spindles. Their fingers move quickly, almost unconsciously, as if the rhythm of creation is built into muscle memory. A young girl hums a low tune as she spins, and soon the others join in. The sound is soft, meditative, blending with the clatter of wooden looms and the distant calls of merchants. One of the women notices your attention and smiles. "Every spindle has a story," she says. "We spin for warmth, for decoration, for life. Sometimes the thread chooses its own path, and we merely follow." Her eyes twinkle with quiet amusement. Or maybe I just like to tell the apprentices that to keep them humble. You step closer to observe their technique. The wool is teased, twisted, and carefully wound around the spindle, transforming from soft fibers into a strong, continuous thread. Watching the process, you feel the patience it demands. There's a rhythm here, a dialogue between human and material that transcends words. Each rotation of the spindle, each pull of the wool is deliberate. It's almost hypnotic, and you can feel yourself slowing to match the pace. Across the courtyard, a group of young men is weaving rugs on low looms. They sit cross-legged, each one following a pattern drawn on parchment pinned nearby. The designs are intricate, geometric shapes interlaced with tiny motifs of lions, birds, and flowers. You notice that each pattern repeats, but never exactly the same. Subtle deviations mark the individual hand behind the creation. One apprentice catches your gaze. "We're taught to follow the pattern, yes," he says quietly, "but not to lose our touch. The design is the guide, not the master. A perfect thread without soul is useless." You consider that statement for a moment. It's easy to see how weaving and embroidery reflect larger philosophies, balance between discipline and creativity, order and spontaneity. The patterns themselves are symbolic, representing not just beauty, but concepts of cosmic order, morality, and societal structure. Even the placement of colors carries meaning: reds for courage, blues for loyalty, greens for life. Nearby, a small kiln smolders with clay jars filled with natural dyes. The scent is pungent but earthy: crushed madder root, saffron, and various mineral pigments. A man kneels beside the jars, carefully stirring each vat and testing a single strand of wool. "The color must please the eye," he murmurs, "but it must also speak. A shade chosen poorly can insult a guest or a god." You watch as the colors bloom in the water, transforming dull fibers into vibrant shades that seem to capture light itself. There's a slow magic in the process, a sense that even the simplest act, dipping wool into dye, carries both art and intention. You remember the drying fabrics along the river and the silks in the caravan. The principle is the same everywhere: attention, patience, and respect for the material. As the sun dips lower, the courtyard fills with shadows and the soft clatter of evening preparations. Bundles of finished thread are gathered, dyed cloth is folded neatly, and looms are carefully adjusted for tomorrow's work. The apprentices pause to stretch or share a quiet joke, but the focus never leaves the craft. Even in small towns like Ecbatana, the attention to detail mirrors the grandeur of the royal workshops. A young woman approaches, holding a small ceremonial robe embroidered with tiny golden threads. "This is for the governor's daughter," she says softly. "It must be flawless, but not showy. Grace, not arrogance." She gestures to the delicate flowers woven into the hem. Even ordinary celebrations deserve beauty. You notice a small flaw in the stitching, a thread slightly out of place, but the woman points it out before you can, smiling gently. "Perfection is not the point," she says. "The effort, the care, the intention, those are what matter. Everything else fades with time." Her words resonate with what you've been seeing all day. Persia's artisans are masters of subtlety. They craft for the eyes and hearts of many, balancing utility with aesthetics, tradition with personal expression. A rug, a spindle, a robe, they are all instruments of culture, connecting generations, regions, and people across the vast empire. As evening falls, the courtyard quiets further. The apprentices lay down their tools, and the glow from oil lamps flickers across walls lined with patterned fabrics. You notice how even in modest workshops, light interacts with the materials, bringing out hidden tones in wool, silk, and thread. It's easy to see why Persians place such value on textiles. They are alive with color, texture, and memory.
You find a bench near the central fountain, listening to the gentle ripple of water as the city prepares for night. Somewhere nearby, someone hums the tune you heard earlier from the spinning girls, creating a thread of sound that ties the workshop together. You feel a sense of continuity, as if each day, each stitch, each color, and each rhythm is part of a larger tapestry stretching across time and space. And in that quiet moment, you understand, Persia's greatness is not just in empires, palaces, or armies. It is in these hands, in these threads, in the devotion and patience woven into every corner of daily life. Each stitch, each dye, each weave is a whisper of history, a subtle assertion of culture, a reminder that even the smallest acts can endure. The morning sun filters through the lattice windows of a quiet workshop near the outskirts of Susa, casting thin, golden lines across the earthen floor. You step carefully, your sandals making soft impressions on the dust, and the faint scent of wool and oil greets you. The room is smaller than the grand palace halls, yet it hums with a quiet energy, as if every fiber, every loom, and every hand is in conversation. You realize immediately that this is a space dedicated to subtle mastery, where craft meets contemplation. In one corner, a man works on a tapestry that seems almost alive, each thread pulling light and shadow in a delicate dance. He pauses now and then to adjust the tension, to guide a color across the warp like a painter moving a brush over canvas. The scene he is weaving depicts a hunt, lions crouching in tall grass, hounds frozen mid-leap, hunters poised with bows. Yet there's an elegance to it that feels more like poetry than action. You watch, fascinated, as he folds a thread through, over, under, then back again. His movements are patient, almost meditative. "Every stitch counts," he murmurs, not looking up. "Even the ones hidden at the back. They support the whole. Invisible labor sustains beauty." The idea resonates. Persia's artisans do not work solely for display. Their effort ensures endurance. The threads, dyes, and techniques are meant to withstand time, travel, and use, even if the observer never sees the hidden complexity. Historians still argue whether Persian textiles were valued primarily for their utility, their symbolism, or their aesthetic innovation. But standing here, it feels clear that all three are inseparable. Near the loom, a young apprentice is twisting dyed threads together, blending camel hair with sheep's wool to achieve a subtle gradient of ochre and chestnut. He pauses, furrows his brow, then runs his fingers along the newly spun yarn. "Sometimes the colors argue," he says softly. "The red refuses to sit with the yellow. You must persuade it gently." You can't help but smile. "Colors have moods?" "Of course," he replies without irony. "Every hue carries a feeling, a memory. Ignore that, and your cloth will speak the wrong language." You wander to a nearby table where finished bolts of cloth are stacked neatly. Rich reds, deep blues, muted greens, all shimmer slightly in the morning light. Each has been treated with careful dyeing techniques using natural pigments. Madder root for reds, indigo for blue, pomegranate for soft yellow, saffron for gold tones. You remember the river dyeing scene and the sun-drying fabrics, but here it's a more refined process, slow and precise, each bolt treated individually. A woman with silver-threaded hair beckons you over. She points to a partially embroidered tunic. "See this pattern?" she asks. "The flowers at the hem, the border along the sleeves? Each element is intentional. They signal age, status, and sometimes family lineage. The pattern is a language." You study the stitching. Indeed, it's precise, almost mathematical, yet full of subtle variations that indicate handwork. "So every citizen wears a story?" "In a way," she says. "Even the simplest robe carries information. You could almost read a neighborhood by looking at their clothing." Her hands linger over the silk threads, smoothing them carefully. The fabric is a map, a social contract, and an offering all at once. You move to examine a small pile of wool dyed in soft pastels. Each piece has been combed, spun, dyed, and folded with care. You notice how light plays differently across fibers, making the colors shift with every slight movement. It's almost as if the fabric breathes, you murmur. The woman chuckles softly. It does, if you treat it well. Coarse wool may survive hardship, but fine wool reflects life. As you wander through the workshop, your gaze catches on a line of embroidered belts and sashes arranged on a low shelf. Some are simple, with repeating geometric motifs. Others feature animals or abstract forms. One, in particular, depicts a lion and bull in mid-stride, reminiscent of the motifs you've seen elsewhere in palaces. Yet here it's scaled smaller, meant for everyday use rather than ceremonial display. You run your fingers along the tight embroidery, feeling the density of thread and the deliberate spacing. Nearby, a young man demonstrates spinning wool using a drop spindle. The fibers twist neatly, transforming under his hands into a smooth, continuous thread. You notice his movements are rhythmic, almost hypnotic, and the spindle seems to dance between his fingers. "We spin as if telling a story," he explains. Every rotation, every twist, every pull carries intention. It's slow work, yes, but meaningful. Patience is the fabric's best friend. Pause, letting his words sink in. Persia's mastery of textile craft is more than technical skill. It is philosophy embodied in material. Each step in the process, from dyeing to spinning, weaving to embroidery, carries layers of meaning. Even the smallest imperfection is deliberate, a reflection of the hand, the moment, and the artisan's intention. As the sun climbs higher, the workshop fills with soft activity. Threads are twisted, looms clack, water splashes in small bowls used for wetting wool, and gentle voices murmur encouragement or corrections. You realize that the artistry is communal, passed down through observation, guidance, and quiet mentorship. Apprentices learn not just technique, but judgment, rhythm, and the subtle language of color and form. A sudden gust of wind lifts a corner of a drying cloth outside the open doorway, letting sunlight catch a hidden sheen. You notice the careful blending of gold thread into blue silk, a combination that glows faintly, as if holding a secret. "Even the back has beauty," one of the artisans remarks casually. You never see it, but the threads are ordered there too. Every side matters. The principle extends to life itself, you think. What is hidden supports what is seen. The empire functions not only through spectacle, but through invisible effort, discipline, and intention. The hands of these artisans, quiet as they are, sustain culture in ways that no palace decree or monument ever could. As afternoon wanes, you step outside, letting the light play across your eyes. The air carries the scent of natural dyes, of wool, and faintly, of the river that feeds the city. Children chase each other through narrow streets, wearing simple but carefully woven garments. Their clothing carries subtle traces of these workshops, colors, patterns, and techniques that have passed silently from one generation to the next. You pause and imagine the empire as a vast tapestry, each artisan, merchant, and citizen a single thread contributing to a whole that no one person can see. And yet, every thread is essential, every pattern meaningful, every effort quietly monumental. The day slips slowly toward evening. You watch as the artisans begin to tidy their workspaces, fold dyed fabrics neatly, and prepare looms for the next day. A quiet calm settles over the courtyard, punctuated only by the soft clatter of threads and occasional laughter. Persia's culture thrives here in subtlety and patience, as much in small workshops as in grand halls. And as you step away, the faint hum of looms, the scent of dye, and the shimmer of golden threads linger in your senses.
Even after you leave, you carry a sense of the empire's quiet power. The invisible network of knowledge, skill, and devotion woven into every corner of daily life. Dawn arrives quietly over the rolling hills surrounding Persepolis, brushing the terraces and gardens with a soft amber glow. You wander toward the northern workshops, where the morning air carries the mixed scents of fresh wool, earth, and faint incense from a nearby temple. The city is still waking. Merchants are unpacking goods, and artisans are already at their looms and spinning wheels. It is in these quiet hours that you notice the subtle patterns of daily life, the understated rhythms that sustain the empire. In a low stone building, a group of women works at embroidery frames. Each frame holds a partially completed garment or decorative panel. You move closer and notice the delicacy of their work. Tiny, precise stitches forming flowers, geometric patterns, and occasionally tiny creatures hidden cleverly among the threads. One woman, her hair tied back in a simple braid, looks up and smiles. "See the birds?" she asks, pointing to a corner of a tunic. They fly only toward the edge of the frame. If they cross the center, it is a bad omen for the wearer. You lean closer, squinting at the intricate stitches. Indeed, the bird's tiny wings are angled carefully, as though their flight is choreographed. "So every detail matters?" you ask. She nods, fingers flying over the silk threads. "Yes, but also, sometimes a little mischief slips in." She points to a small, almost hidden animal, a monkey perched atop a flower. "The master says the gods like surprises." You chuckle softly, appreciating the blend of seriousness and playful humor. It is a reminder that Persian artisans are not only meticulous, but also imaginative, embedding subtle personal touches in works that otherwise follow strict conventions. Nearby, a young apprentice spins wool with a drop spindle. The fibers twist smoothly, transforming from loose strands into sturdy thread. He hums a quiet tune, the sound blending with the soft clack of a loom and the occasional splash of water from a nearby dyeing basin. You notice how every movement is deliberate, almost meditative, each rotation of the spindle echoing a rhythm that has persisted for generations. A man overseeing the work gestures for you to come closer. He picks up a recently dyed thread, holding it up to the sunlight. "Notice the gradient," he says. "This isn't accidental. We mix colors, timing, and technique to produce subtle shifts. The eye will see harmony, even if the mind cannot trace the method." You run your fingers over the thread, feeling its softness and noticing the slight variations in tone. There is a depth here, a quiet sophistication in every fiber. Even something as simple as wool or silk carries layers of intention, skill, and history. Historians still argue whether Persian artisans viewed this as purely artistic, symbolic, or functional. Watching these hands, you suspect it was all three at once. From another corner of the room, the soft clatter of looms rises and falls. Several men are weaving large carpets, their hands moving with steady precision. You notice subtle differences in the patterns of each rug. A line slightly off-center, a motif rotated differently, a small animal tucked in an unexpected corner. The deviations are not mistakes, they are signatures, subtle reminders that even within strict tradition, the artisan's hand leaves its mark. A young man leans back for a moment, wiping sweat from his brow. "Perfection is less important than life," he says quietly. "The threads will last generations, and each carries a part of us. Even an imperfection becomes part of the story." You move toward a table with small containers of natural pigments. Reds, blues, yellows, and greens sit in neat jars, each ground and prepared carefully. A woman mixes indigo with water, observing the transformation as the color deepens. "The dye has a mind," she says, half in jest. "It will not bend to your will unless you understand it. Treat it with patience, or it will betray you." The metaphor is not lost on you. Persia's artisans cultivate a relationship with every material: wool, silk, thread, dye. Each element requires respect, attention, and understanding. Even the seemingly mundane acts of mixing pigments or spinning wool are imbued with a quiet reverence. You notice a small pile of finished sashes stacked neatly in a corner. Each one has been embroidered, dyed, and woven with care, designed for everyday wear rather than ceremonial use. Yet even these simpler items carry meaning: colors that indicate regional origin, motifs that suggest family ties, subtle variations that reflect the artisan's personal touch. Clothing in Persia is never merely functional. It is communication, culture, and memory woven into every thread. Stepping outside into the courtyard, you see bolts of fabric drying in the morning breeze. Reds, blues, and yellows ripple gently, sunlight catching every subtle variation. You watch as an apprentice walks among them, adjusting folds and rotating the fabric so it dries evenly. Each movement is careful, unhurried, almost ritualistic. Nearby, a small group of children plays quietly, dressed in clothes that reflect the techniques you've observed. Their garments carry tiny embroidered motifs, simple patterns repeated from larger works, subtle evidence of the empire's pervasive craftsmanship. Even the youngest citizens participate in the visual culture, whether knowingly or not, wearing symbols that communicate belonging and tradition. You pause to reflect on the continuity of this knowledge. From grand palaces to modest workshops, the skills, patterns, and philosophies persist, passed down through apprenticeship, observation, and daily practice. What may appear simple to an outsider is, in fact, the product of centuries of refinement. Each stitch, each twist of thread, each careful adjustment of dye is a link in a chain that stretches across generations. A faint breeze carries the scent of lavender and earth. You inhale slowly, letting the quiet energy of the workshop fill your senses. The hum of looms, the gentle laughter of apprentices, the careful rhythm of spindles, it all blends into a tapestry of sensation that mirrors the visual patterns you've observed. Persia's artisans create not only textiles, but an environment, a culture, a living network of skill and tradition. You find a shaded bench near the center of the courtyard and watch the sunlight shift across the fabrics. Gold threads glint faintly, blues deepen in shadow, and reds seem to pulse softly in the warmth. You realize that even the simplest textile carries a story of material, maker, culture, and time. Each thread is an echo, a small testament to the careful, deliberate effort that underpins Persian life. As the day moves toward noon, you feel a sense of connection, not just to the artisans, but to the history they embody. The techniques, motifs, and rhythms you witness are part of a continuum, linking you to generations past and present. Persia, you think, is stitched together not only with roads and walls, but with fibers, color, and quiet intention. And as you rise from the bench to continue your journey, you carry with you the hum of looms, the soft rustle of drying fabrics, and the knowledge that even in the smallest workshop, the heart of an empire beats in thread, dye, and patient hands. The afternoon sun drifts low over the rooftops of Pasargadae, casting long, warm shadows across narrow streets lined with small weaving workshops. You wander through the lanes, the air fragrant with the faint scent of wool, freshly dyed cloth, and earth warmed by the sun. The city feels alive, yet unhurried, a quiet rhythm pulsing beneath the surface, anchored by the steady, patient work of artisans who have been shaping threads and fabrics long before you arrived. You step into a large courtyard where several weavers are at work. The gentle clatter of looms fills the space.
blending with the murmur of conversations and occasional laughter. A man bends over a loom, guiding strands of camel hair through an intricate geometric pattern. His hands are steady, fingers moving in a fluid rhythm honed by years of practice. Notice how the lines repeat but never exactly match, he says, without looking up. It gives life to the design. Perfect symmetry is for statues, not textiles. You nod, tracing the delicate variations with your eyes. Even in what might seem minor, there is intention, a careful balance between precision and human touch. Historians still argue whether this deliberate imperfection was purely aesthetic or carried symbolic meaning, but you sense it is both, a reflection of the artisan's hand and a metaphor for life itself. Nearby, a young apprentice kneads wool into a dye bath, turning it slowly so that indigo and saffron mix to produce soft, muted shades. Colors argue if you rush them, he says, half smiling. They require patience, attention, and a gentle hand. You watch as the fibers gradually absorb the pigment, transforming from dull, rough strands into vibrant, smooth threads that gleam in the afternoon light. You walk among rows of drying fabrics, observing how the sunlight plays across textures and hues. Deep reds from madder root, soft yellows from pomegranate, blues from indigo, and greens from blending pigments shimmer with subtle variations, almost like water rippling over sand. Each piece has a unique story, woven, dyed, and shaped by the artisan's choices. Even a simple cloth carries layers of history, knowledge, and skill. A woman nearby is embroidering a ceremonial robe with delicate gold thread. Tiny motifs of lions, birds, and floral designs flow across the fabric in carefully calculated sequences. She pauses to adjust a stitch, then smiles. Even the smallest detail matters, she says. A tiny flower can speak of family, faith, or fortune. You learn to listen with your hands. You remember the earlier workshops in Ecbatana and Susa and realize a pattern emerges. Across the empire, artisans work with similar philosophies. Thread and fabric are more than material. They are a language, a repository of knowledge, and a medium for subtle expression. The repetition of technique links generations, while small variations allow for individuality. Each piece of cloth is both a product and a teacher. A young boy spins wool nearby, the drop spindle turning in steady rhythm. He hums a low tune that blends with the ambient sounds of weaving and drying cloth. The melody is almost hypnotic, and you find yourself slowing your breathing to match the rhythm, feeling the patience and care embedded in every motion. It's a gentle reminder that the process itself, slow, deliberate, and mindful, is as important as the finished product. You notice a pile of belts and sashes in one corner, each embroidered with subtle symbols indicating status, age, or family affiliation. Even these small, utilitarian items are treated with care, dyed and woven to communicate meaning quietly but effectively. In Persia, textiles are not just clothing. They are social markers, conveyors of information, and threads of continuity. Nearby, an older man folds a finished bolt of cloth, patting it gently before stacking it with others. "We work for today, yes," he says, "but also for tomorrow. Every thread carries intention. Every stitch is a promise." You watch the pile grow, realizing that the labor of these hands will ripple outward, reaching homes, markets, and ceremonies across the empire. You wander to a shaded corner where smaller workshops sit side by side. The artisans here specialize in dyeing and spinning. You watch as a woman carefully stirs a mixture of indigo, alum, and water, testing a single thread for color absorption. She hums softly, her tone rising and falling with the motion of the spindle. "It is slow work," she says, "but necessary. Every fiber must be guided. Every thread must learn its place." Her words resonate with the broader perspective you've been gaining.
Persia's greatness is stitched together through patient, thoughtful labor. It is not only the grandeur of palaces and armies, but the quiet consistency of workshops, the careful nurturing of craft, and the subtle transmission of knowledge across generations. Even the smallest, most mundane acts of weaving or dyeing carry weight and significance. A soft breeze stirs the drying fabrics, lifting a corner to reveal the intricate work beneath. Gold threads glint faintly, and the subtle gradients of color shift with the movement. You are reminded that even hidden or background work, the threads at the back of a loom, the hidden stitches, supports the visible beauty. Invisible labor sustains life and culture, quietly holding the empire together. You pause near a fountain, watching reflections shimmer across the water. Children play nearby, wearing garments subtly adorned with embroidered motifs, miniature echoes of the artistry around them. Even the youngest citizens participate in this living tradition, wearing pieces that carry symbolic meaning and reflect cultural continuity. As the day wanes, artisans begin to tidy their spaces, fold finished cloth, and prepare looms for tomorrow. The soft clatter of tools and gentle hum of conversation create a calming symphony. You feel the quiet pulse of Persia beneath your feet, patience, skill, and intention woven into every corner of daily life. And as the sun sets, you step back to absorb the scene. The shimmering fabrics, the steady hands, the soft murmur of activity. Persia is more than monuments or kings. It is in the hands of these artisans. In every careful stitch, every thoughtful dye bath, every twist of wool. The empire lives in thread and fiber, rhythm and patience, continuity and quiet devotion. The golden light of early evening drifts across the terraces of Persepolis, softening the edges of stone columns and casting long shadows over the courtyards. You wander slowly, letting the quiet rhythm of the city guide your steps. There is no rush here. The bustle of markets has softened to a gentle hum, the distant laughter of children echoing faintly down narrow streets. The air carries a medley of scents: fresh wool, drying dyes, and the faint aroma of baking bread from nearby homes. It is a moment suspended, where time seems to dilate just enough for you to notice every detail. The texture of a sun-warmed wall, the glint of golden thread in the fading light, the soft brush of fabric against stone. You enter a workshop tucked under the eaves of a low-roofed building where artisans are finishing their day's labor. Bolts of silk and wool are folded neatly, embroidered robes hung carefully, and finished rugs stacked like silent testaments to patience and skill. A young woman gently lifts a length of blue-dyed cloth, letting it catch the sun as she smooths each wrinkle. "It must breathe," she says softly. "Fabric, like people, performs best when handled with care." You watch her hands, noting how every motion is deliberate, every adjustment measured. The thread itself seems to respond, shifting in subtle ways under her fingers. There is a quiet magic here, an unspoken understanding between maker and material that has been refined over generations. Historians still argue whether the precision in Persian weaving was purely functional, symbolic, or artistic. But witnessing it, you understand that it is all of these things simultaneously. A young apprentice spins wool at a nearby spindle, his hands moving with rhythmic patience. The fibers twist seamlessly into thread, and he hums a soft tune that blends with the faint clatter of looms and the distant trickle of water from a fountain. You realize that every sound in this space, the hum, the clack, the soft footfalls, forms a subtle orchestra, one that guides the hands and eyes of those working here. The process itself is almost meditative, a continuous flow where creation and contemplation intertwine. You wander to a corner where embroidered ceremonial sashes are laid out, each adorned with intricate motifs of lions, birds, and flowers. The patterns repeat, but never exactly mirror each other. Subtle variations reveal the touch of individual hands. A man notices your gaze and chuckles softly. Perfection is not the goal, he says. Life is imperfect, and our work reflects that. Every stitch carries intention, even if it strays from the pattern. Nearby, containers of natural dyes stand ready. Vibrant reds from madder root, deep blues from indigo, delicate yellows from saffron. You watch as an apprentice dips a single strand of wool into indigo, the color blooming slowly as it absorbs the pigment. Patience, she murmurs. The fibers will tell you when they are ready. Force them and you spoil them. The lesson, you realize, extends beyond textiles. Patience, observation, and gentle guidance are principles that echo through the culture, shaping lives as much as cloth. Beyond the workshop, sunlight glints off drying fabrics strung across terraces. Gold threads shimmer faintly among blues and reds, creating a subtle interplay of light and shadow. You walk along the edge of the courtyard, letting your fingers brush against the textiles. Each piece is a quiet story, woven with skill, care, and tradition. Even a simple bolt of cloth embodies history, culture, and human connection. Children run past, laughing, wearing garments that echo the patterns and colors of the workshops. Even the youngest members of society carry traces of this tradition in their clothing, unknowingly participating in a continuum of craft and culture. Persia is stitched together not only by roads and palaces, but by threads, colors, and the patient hands that shape them. As evening deepens, the artists begin to tidy their workspaces, fold finished fabrics, and prepare looms for the next day. The courtyard grows quieter, shadows lengthen and soften. You pause near a fountain, listening to the gentle ripple of water, and notice how the fabrics sway slightly in the evening breeze. The colors shift subtly, revealing hidden nuances in each thread. The world feels suspended, almost alive in the delicate play of light, texture, and movement. You take a slow breath, letting the calm settle over you. The workshops, the drying cloths, the humming of spindles, they all form a living tapestry, a network of continuity and care. Persia's artisans work not for fame or spectacle, but to sustain culture, memory, and beauty in ways that endure quietly across time. Every stitch, every dye bath, every careful twist of wool carries meaning, intention, and devotion. And as you begin to leave the courtyard, the fading sun ignites a golden glow across the city, illuminating the threads of every fabric, every story, every hand that has contributed to this vast, intricate network of life and art. You pause, feeling the weight and delicacy of it all, the beauty of patient labor, the legacy of countless hands, and the gentle persistence of culture. You settle on a shaded bench, letting the quiet evening embrace you. The smells, colors, and soft sounds linger in your senses, carrying with them the sense of continuity, care, and quiet devotion. The world slows, and for a moment, nothing else exists but the gentle rhythm of life, the tactile poetry of textiles, and the patient hands that have guided them for generations. You close your eyes briefly, imagining threads stretching from workshop to workshop, city to city, weaving people and stories into an enduring tapestry. It is comforting to think that something so delicate, so meticulous, so ordinary can carry such profound meaning across time. Every day, artisans continue this quiet work, sustaining the heartbeat of a civilization in threads and dyes, patterns and colors, rhythm and patience. The air cools, the shadows deepen, and the hum of the city softens to a gentle whisper. You feel the calm settle fully around you, the textures, scents, and sounds blending into a serene melody of history. The looms may be still for the night, but their lessons, their rhythm, and their stories persist, echoing softly in your mind. As you rise from the bench and step into the cooling evening,
You carry with you the subtle magic of the workshops, the invisible threads of Persian life, and the quiet knowledge that culture, patience, and care endure long after any monument or ruler. The tapestry of Persia is vast, intricate, and persistent, and you have glimpsed it in its gentlest, most human form. Now, as the city rests and night approaches, you let the memories of threads, dyes, and patient hands linger softly in your mind. The hum of spindles and the shimmer of woven silk fade gently, leaving only the quiet reassurance that these delicate, thoughtful acts continue beyond sight, beyond time, and beyond the moment.
Slowly, you exhale, feeling your body sink into the calm. Each breath a gentle rhythm, matching the patient weaving, the subtle dyeing, and the enduring craft of countless artisans. Persia persists not in grandeur alone, but in the ordinary, carefully attended threads that hold a civilization together. Sweet dreams.